Why did her fingers hesitate for half a second before pushing the door open? It wasn't fear. She learned long ago how fear announced itself: sharp, loud, impatient. This was quieter, a brief internal pause, a question she didn't ask out loud. Is tonight worth the energy? The music hit first. Heavy bass, glass clinking, laughter bouncing off low ceilings. A military bar just outside the base gate, packed wall to wall with uniforms and half-uniforms, the end-of-week pressure bleeding out through noise. Payday weekend. Everyone a little louder, a little looser, everyone pretending tomorrow didn't exist. She stepped inside anyway. Plain clothes, jeans, a dark jacket zipped halfway, no insignia, no visible rank, nothing that announced who she was or what she'd carried through deserts and briefing rooms and nights without sleep. Just another woman walking into a space that had decided long ago who belonged and who didn't. She moved to the counter and waited. 5 minutes passed, maybe more. She didn't check her watch, didn't shift her weight, didn't wave cash or lean forward. She'd waited longer for worse things. Around her, voices shoved and overlapped. Men called out drink orders. A few bodies pressed too close. Someone laughed too hard behind her. None of it touched her expression. Still, she felt it. That familiar sensation of being unseen and overly visible at the same time. Then came the voice. "What the hell you doing?" It cut through the noise because it wanted to be heard. She didn't look at him at first. That was instinct, not defiance. Years of training had taught her the value of not escalating, of letting small storms pass. She kept her eyes forward, her posture neutral. Bad choice, apparently. "I said get out." The words were slurred but sharp. Close now, too close. She could smell alcohol, cheap beer, something bitter underneath, entitlement maybe. She stayed still. That was when the hand came down. Fingers twisted into her hair without warning. A sharp pull. Pain flared bright and sudden, dragging her balance off center. The room didn't go quiet immediately, it stuttered. Sound skipping like a record. "I said get out, you don't belong here." Her scalp burned, but she didn't scream. She didn't swing. She didn't beg. Instead, she did something that surprised even herself. She steadied. Hands lifted just enough to keep her feet. Her breathing slowed instead of spiking. She absorbed the shove that followed and took 2 steps back, controlled, measured, refusing to fall. That refusal mattered more than anyone realized. The Marine laughed, loud, proud, like he'd just performed for the room, like dominance was something you could earn in a single ugly gesture. She adjusted her jacket, slowly, carefully, not because it needed fixing, because she did. Inside her chest, something cracked. Not pain, something older. Disappointment. The same disappointment she'd felt too many times to count. In briefings where her voice had been ignored. In rooms where decisions she'd warned against were approved anyway. In moments where she'd carried responsibility without recognition. She looked up then. And the look on her face, calm, level, almost tired, landed harder than any insult could have. Across the room, a man in a corner booth noticed. He hadn't been watching her at first. He rarely watched anyone. Habit had trained him to sit with his back to the wall, eyes loose, attention wide. The bar had been noise and motion and nothing worth engaging. Until it was. He saw the grab, saw the imbalance, saw the way she recovered instead of collapsing. That told him everything. He rose without hurry. No patches, no rank. Just a worn t-shirt stretched over a body shaped by discipline rather than display. The kind of stillness that didn't seek attention but commanded it anyway. The Marine moved toward her again, emboldened by silence. By the way no one else stepped in. His friends laughed, the nervous kind that comes when people know they're past a line but don't know how to stop. "What are you gonna do about it?" he sneered. Before she could answer, before she needed to, a voice cut clean through the bar. "Step away now." The Marine turned, irritated, smirked when he saw the man standing 15 feet away. Or what? The response wasn't verbal. One step fast, clean. The Marine barely registered the movement before his balance was gone. His arm redirected. His weight turned against him. Gravity finished the conversation. 3 seconds. That was all it took. The Marine hit the floor hard enough to stun, not break. A knee pinned his chest. A wrist locked in a way that didn't threaten, it promised. "Stay down," the man said calmly. No anger, no performance. Just truth. The room froze. Someone whispered when they saw the ink on his forearm, a trident half hidden. Another whisper followed. Then another. She watched it all from where she stood, pulse steady, mind clear. "Ma'am," the man said, finally looking at her, "are you hurt?" That single word shifted the gravity of the room. "Ma'am." The Marine beneath him went still. Someone else finally recognized her. "Oh God," a voice breathed, "that's Colonel Martinez." Angela Martinez, Marine Corps Intelligence. She nodded once, "I'm fine, thank you." But inside, the calm she'd perfected over decades trembled. Because this wasn't about rank. It never had been. And that realization, that dignity had to be defended by strangers when it should have been upheld by everyone, settled heavy in her chest. Military police arrived quickly, too quickly for excuses, too late for undoing. The Marine was cuffed, hauled up, his face gray with understanding, his career ending in real time. "I didn't know," he kept saying. "She wasn't in uniform." "Doesn't matter." Angela watched him go, not with satisfaction but with something closer to grief. Not for him. For the culture that had let this happen at all. As the bar slowly resumed breathing, she finished her water and turned toward the exit. The man Ghost, they called him, raised his beer in quiet acknowledgement. She nodded back and walked out into the night. But the story didn't end there. Because what no one in that bar knew, what they couldn't see beneath plain clothes and controlled breathing, was the weight she carried home with her that night. And why standing upright in that moment mattered more than any mission she'd ever commanded. Why did the silence follow her all the way to the parking lot? The door shut behind her, cutting off the bass and voices like a sudden drop underwater. Cold night air pressed against her face, the kind that should have felt clean. It didn't. It felt heavy, like the bar had let her leave but not the moment. Angela Martinez walked slowly across cracked asphalt, boots clicking softer than they should have. Her shoulders stayed squared, her spine straight. Anyone watching would have seen composure, control, a senior officer unfazed by a small, ugly incident. But inside, the noise hadn't stopped. Her fingers trembled once as she reached her car. Just once. She noticed it immediately and hated herself for noticing. She slid into the driver's seat and shut the door, letting the quiet settle around her. For a moment, she didn't start the engine. She rested her hands on the steering wheel and stared through the windshield at nothing in particular. 17. That number surfaced without warning. 17 was the first time she'd been told she didn't belong somewhere. A training hangar, a borrowed flight suit 2 sizes too big, men who smiled politely while assuming she'd wash out by lunch. She hadn't screamed then either. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself the way she'd taught young analysts before their first deployment brief. Name what you feel. Control what you can. Anger, yes, but not the kind that explodes. It was quieter, denser. Disappointment had weight. She started the car and pulled out, headlights cutting through the dark road leading back toward base housing. Every red light felt longer than usual, every passing vehicle too close. Her scalp still throbbed where his fingers had dug in, not enough to injure, enough to remind. At a stoplight, she caught her reflection in the rearview mirror. She looked tired. Not weak, not shaken, just worn. How many times, she wondered, had she stood still while waiting for someone else to do the right thing? How many rooms had she survived by staying calm while lines were crossed inches from her face? The bar wasn't unique. That was the worst part. Her phone buzzed once on the console, then again. She didn't look at it. Somewhere behind her, the bar would already be turning the incident into a story. Embellishments, jokes that missed the point, lessons half learned. Tomorrow, paperwork would flow, statements, investigations, careers adjusted. None of that addressed the part that stayed lodged in her chest. She drove the rest of the way in silence. Her house sat modestly among identical units, beige siding, trimmed lawns, quiet proof that rank didn't buy extravagance. She parked, shut off the engine, and sat there longer than necessary. Inside, the lights stayed off. She kicked off her shoes by the door and leaned her forehead briefly against the cool wood, breathing out slowly. The house smelled like coffee grounds and old books, familiar, safe. Only then did she allow herself to sink onto the couch. The image replayed without invitation, the hand in her hair, the laughter, the pause before intervention. And then the movement. That clean step, the decisiveness, the absence of ego. Ghost. She didn't know his name then, not really. Only what he represented. Someone who hadn't hesitated. Someone who'd seen the line and acted without asking permission. It unsettled her more than the assault itself. Because she was used to being the one who stepped in. Her phone buzzed again. This time she picked it up. 3 missed calls, 1 text. From her executive officer. "Ma'am, MP's filed preliminary. Are you okay?" She typed back a short reply. "I'm fine, we'll talk in the morning." She set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come easily. When it finally did, it wasn't rest. She dreamed of sand. Heat shimmered over a distant ridgeline. A drone feed flickered in the corner of her vision. Voices overlapped in her headset, analysts arguing probabilities, commanders demanding certainty where none existed. She was younger in the dream, less gray at the temples, still carrying the quiet pressure of proving she belonged in rooms where doubt followed her like a shadow. "Angela," someone said, "we need a call." She knew what was coming before it happened. The feed zoomed, a convoy slowed, a decision window closed. She opened her mouth to speak. And woke up. Morning light crept through the blinds. She sat up slowly, heart steady but heavy. Some stories never left you. At headquarters, the day moved with the efficiency of routine. Salutes, brief nods, conversations that danced around the incident without touching it directly. She could feel it, though, the shift, eyes lingering a fraction longer, voices lowering when she passed. In the briefing room, she took her seat at the head of the table. The hum of conversation died naturally, not because she demanded it, because presence did the work. As the briefing progressed, her mind stayed engaged. She asked sharp questions, corrected assumptions, pushed back where certainty was overstated. But beneath it all, something else brewed. At the end, as officers filed out, her exo lingered. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there's chatter." She raised an eyebrow slightly, an invitation. "About last night, people are saying that you handled it with restraint." She almost smiled. "Is that what they're calling it?" He shifted, uncomfortable. "Some are saying they would have reacted differently." "Of course they are," she said evenly. "They weren't there." He nodded. "Sir, I mean, ma'am, I just wanted you to know some of the junior Marines noticed." That caught her attention. "Noticed what?" "That you didn't need to raise your voice to command respect." She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. Dismissed. After he left, she sat alone. Restraint wasn't weakness, but it came at a cost. Later that afternoon, she found herself standing in the hallway outside a different office. one she hadn't planned on visiting. A nameplate gleamed softly. Senior Chief Marcus Jackson. She hesitated. She wasn't used to hesitation. Inside, Ghost sat behind a simple desk, reviewing a folder. He looked up immediately, rising to his feet. "Ma'am." "At ease," she said gently. He obeyed, but his posture remained respectful, alert. "I won't take much of your time," she said. "I wanted to thank you again properly." He studied her for a moment, not in a way that challenged, in a way that assessed sincerity. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm here." A pause stretched between them. "You ever wonder," she continued, "why it's easier to act for a stranger than for ourselves?" He considered that. "Sometimes," he said, "it's clearer when it's not personal." She nodded slowly. That answer settled something inside her. "Still," she said, "your clarity mattered." He inclined his head. "So did yours. You didn't let it turn you into something you're not." That surprised her. "People think strength looks like noise," he added. "They forget how much discipline it takes to stay quiet." For the first time since the bar, something inside her eased. She left his office lighter than she'd entered. But the incident wasn't done with her. That night, alone again, she stood at her window and watched lights blink across the base. Training continued. Missions planned. Lives intersected in ways most people would never see. She thought about the Marine on the floor, about his friends, about the ones who'd looked away. She thought about the ones who hadn't. And she understood something then, something she'd avoided naming. Leadership wasn't just about command decisions or operational success. It was about what you tolerated and what you chose to answer. The next morning she drafted a memo, not disciplinary, not punitive. Reflective. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a start. Because dignity didn't always announce itself with force. Sometimes it waited. And sometimes, when it was finally tested, it revealed who was willing to act and who was still learning how. Why did the memory surface now, when she thought she had already buried it? Angela Martinez stood in the observation gallery overlooking the training floor, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on movement below. Recruits moved through scenarios with rehearsed urgency, voices sharp, steps deliberate, confidence still fragile. From above, it looked clean, controlled, predictable. Real life never was. She reviewed the overnight intel twice already. Nothing urgent, nothing that required her personal attention. And yet, she hadn't left. Something restless kept her there, watching bodies move through drills meant to prepare them for moments that would never look like the drill itself. The bar incident had followed her into this space, uninvited. Not the violence, the pause. That fraction of time when a room full of trained service members had collectively decided to wait. She turned slightly as a voice approached. "Ma'am." She recognized it before she saw him. Captain Ellis, mid-30s, sharp mind, still carried idealism like an untested weapon. "At ease," she said without looking away. "What is it?" "Command wants your assessment on the Red Basin briefing. They moved it up." "Of course they did," she murmured. "Send them my notes. I'll join in 20. "Yes, ma'am." He hesitated. She felt it. "There's something else," he said carefully. She finally looked at him. "Speak freely, Captain." He took a breath. Some of the junior officers, they've been talking about leadership, about what happened off base. Her jaw tightened, not outwardly, just enough to register. "And they're asking questions," he continued. "Not bad ones, hard ones." She studied him. "Questions make people uncomfortable." "Yes, ma'am, but they're listening." That mattered more than he realized. "Thank you," she said. "That's all." After he left, she remained where she was, gaze drifting back to the floor below. One recruit stumbled. Another reached out automatically, steadying him before the instructor barked corrections. Instinct. Why did it vanish when stakes became social instead of physical? Her phone buzzed, a message she hadn't expected. Marcus Jackson. Ma'am, if you have time today, coffee. She stared at the screen longer than necessary. She wasn't sure why she said yes. They met at a small base cafe just before dusk. Neutral ground. No hierarchy in the smell of burnt coffee and worn linoleum. He arrived early. She noticed that, not because it impressed her, but because it aligned with everything else. They sat across from each other, no rush, no ceremony. You wanted to talk, she said. He nodded. You looked like someone carrying more than they were letting on. A direct observation, no judgment. She exhaled slowly. You don't strike me as someone who enjoys small talk. I don't, he admitted, so we don't have to. Silence settled between them, comfortable, rare. Do you know how many times, she said quietly, I've been in rooms where decisions were made over my objections? He didn't interrupt. Lives lost, she continued, not because the intel wasn't there, but because the voice delivering it didn't match expectations. Her hands tightened around the cup. That bar, she said, wasn't about one drunk Marine. It was about that same pattern, the assumption, the dismissal. Marcus leaned back slightly. You didn't correct him. No, she said, I didn't. Why? She met his eyes. Because I shouldn't have to prove legitimacy in every room I enter. He nodded once. That's the cost of restraint. She looked down, and the danger of it. They sat with that. Do you ever regret stepping in? She asked. No, he said without hesitation. Not even knowing it would ripple, careers, consequences. That's not what I stepped in for, he replied. I stepped in because the line was crossed. Everything after that is noise. She considered him carefully. You didn't ask who I was. I didn't need to, he said. You were a person being wronged. That answer landed deeper than she expected. She smiled faintly, the first real one in days. That night she stayed late at her office. The building emptied around her. Fluorescent lights hummed softly. She pulled a file from her drawer, one she hadn't opened in years. Afghanistan, Helmand Province. A decision memo stamped with red. She remembered the day vividly. The briefing room, the impatience, the senior officer who'd waved off her caution with a joke she pretended not to hear. Probability acceptable, he'd said. It hadn't been. The convoy had hit an IED 3 hours later. She attended the memorial in silence, listened to names read aloud, watched families fold into themselves. She'd carried that weight ever since. She closed the file slowly. The bar hadn't reopened old wounds. It had reminded her why she'd endured them. The next morning she addressed a room of junior leaders, unplanned, unannounced. She didn't mention the bar. She talked about thresholds, about moments where hesitation feels safer than action, about how rank and uniform don't absolve responsibility, they sharpen it. She spoke calmly, evenly. The room was silent. Afterward, a young sergeant approached her, nervous, honest. Ma'am, he said, I was there that night, I didn't move. She studied his face, not accusing, not disappointed. What will you do next time? She asked. He swallowed, I'll step in. She nodded, then learn from this, that's how we get better. He stood straighter when he left. Later, alone again, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride, not in authority, in influence. Change was slow, but it started with awareness. That evening she walked the base perimeter as the sun dipped low. The air cooled. Flags stirred gently. She thought about strength, not as force but as choice. About Marcus, about the Marine, about the ones watching. Somewhere between command and compassion, she realized, was the kind of leadership she'd always believed in. Not loud, not theatrical, just present when it mattered. And as darkness settled in, Angela Martinez understood something with new clarity. Sometimes the most important missions aren't assigned. They emerge, quietly, right where dignity is tested, and someone decides whether to act. Why did the warning come as a whisper instead of an order? Angela Martinez heard it just as she stepped into the operations wing, a subtle shift in tone, a murmur that didn't belong to routine. People were speaking more carefully today, not afraid, aware, the kind of awareness that followed a ripple no one had expected to spread. She kept walking. Her heels echoed against polished floors as screens glowed to life along the walls. Maps, timelines, names that would never appear in headlines. This was her world where consequences formed quietly before they ever turned violent. Inside the secure briefing room, chairs filled faster than usual. Red Basin, a name that sounded harmless, it never was. She took her seat scanning faces. Pilots, analysts, liaison officers, each carried their own private tension, the kind that came when missions existed in gray space, not war, not peace. The briefing began without ceremony. A region destabilizing faster than projected, an extraction window narrowing, a female asset embedded deep, compromised, but still alive. Angela leaned forward slightly. "How recent is the confirmation?" she asked. 6 hours, the analyst replied. Thermal imagery plus voice recognition. 6 hours was a lifetime. The room buzzed with overlapping suggestions. Drones, delay, negotiation, risk matrices stacking like excuses. She listened, let them speak, let the noise burn itself out. Then she raised one hand. Silence followed. "We're talking about a human being," she said evenly, "not an acceptable loss statistic." A few eyes shifted, others held. "She's trained," someone said. "She knew the risks." "So did every name on every memorial wall," Angela replied. "That never made them disposable." The air tightened. She felt it again, that old familiar resistance. Not loud, subtle, polite. She learned long ago that opposition didn't always come in raised voices. Sometimes it arrived as reasonable delay. "We don't have authorization yet," a commander offered. "Then get it," she said. "We don't wait for permission to care." That landed. Plans adjusted. Timelines accelerated. A narrow corridor of possibility opened where hesitation had lived minutes before. As the room cleared, her XO stayed behind. "You're pushing hard," he said. "I know," she replied. "If this goes wrong." She met his gaze. "It already has. Our job is to stop it from going worse." Outside, she crossed paths with Marcus Jackson. He wasn't assigned to Red Basin, not officially, but his presence wasn't accidental. "Chief," she grated. "Ma'am," he replied. "Heard you might need quiet hands." She studied him. "You didn't hear that from me." He smiled faintly. "No, I didn't." They stood for a moment in mutual understanding. Some things didn't need documentation. Hours later, Angela stood in the command center as feeds came online. Night vision washed everything in green. The team moved carefully, efficiently. No wasted motion. Her chest tightened, not fear but responsibility. She thought of the woman waiting somewhere in the dark, isolated, counting breaths, wondering if she'd been forgotten. "Hold," Angela said softly. The team froze. A heat signature shifted, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. "Secondary contact," someone whispered. Angela's mind raced. Options collapsed quickly. "Reroute," she said. "Ghost corridor now." There was a pause. "Ma'am, that increases exposure." "Yes," she said, "but it reduces civilian risk." The feed adjusted. Movement resumed. Minutes stretched, every second carried weight. Then a voice crackled through comms, low, controlled. Package secured. Angela exhaled slowly. She didn't smile, not yet. Extraction wasn't complete until wheels were off ground. When it finally was, the room released a collective breath, chairs scraped, shoulders slumped, lives continued. Later, alone in her office, Angela sat in the dim light and allowed the tension to drain. She thought about the bar again, about how quickly people waited for someone else to move. Tonight, someone had waited for her, and she'd answered. A message lit her screen. From Marcus. Clean up, good call. She typed back, then erased it, typed again. Thank you for being ready. The reply came quickly. Always. She leaned back, eyes closed. Strength wasn't loud. It didn't need witnesses. Sometimes it was just a series of choices made under pressure, guided by a line you refused to let blur. As dawn crept in, Angela Martinez understood something new. Redemption didn't arrive as forgiveness. It arrived as action. And sometimes, the quietest decisions carried the heaviest weight. Why did the victory feel heavier than the risk ever had? Angela Martinez noticed it in the quiet after the operation, not relief, but a low, persistent weight settling into her chest. The command center had emptied hours ago. Screens dimmed, voices faded, yet she remained, seated alone, staring at a frozen frame of green-tinted terrain where everything had almost gone wrong. Success had a sound, she'd heard it before. Laughter, backslaps, exhales sharp with adrenaline. Tonight none of it reached her. She powered down the last monitor and stood slowly, joints stiff, body reminding her that time moved forward whether she acknowledged it or not. Outside, the base slept in layers, guard rotations, distant engines, the quiet machinery of readiness. She walked. No escort, no aid, just her boots on concrete and the steady rhythm of breath. She followed the perimeter road until the lights thinned and the sky opened up, stars faint but present. It reminded her of nights overseas, standing on rooftops between missions, wondering how many decisions could live inside one person before something gave. Her phone vibrated once. A message from an unknown number. She's stable, asking for you. Angela stopped walking. Her throat tightened before she could stop it. Where, she typed. Medical wing, restricted. Of course it was. She changed direction without hesitation. The medical wing smelled like antiseptic and late hours, soft lighting, controlled voices. A nurse recognized her immediately and nodded, stepping aside without questions. Inside the room, machines hummed gently, a quiet reassurance of function. The woman on the bed looked smaller than Angela expected. Younger, too. Dark hair pulled back, scrapes along her forearm, bruises blooming where restraints or impact had left their mark. Her eyes were open, alert despite exhaustion. She smiled faintly when she saw Angela. Took you long enough, she said. Angela felt something crack. She moved closer, careful not to crowd the bed. You shouldn't be talking. Doctors say I'll live, the woman replied. They don't know what to do with the rest. Angela nodded. They never do. Silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. You changed the route, the woman said finally. I heard it on comms. Yes. They told you not to. They did. A pause. Thank you, the woman said quietly. Angela studied her, the resilience, the fatigue, the familiar aftermath of survival. You held out, Angela replied. That matters. The woman's gaze drifted to the ceiling. I didn't think anyone was coming. That sentence hit harder than any report. Angela felt the echo of the bar, the waiting, the assumption that silence meant absence. I'm sorry, she said, and meant more than the mission. The woman looked back at her, eyes sharp despite everything. Just don't let it happen again to anyone. Angela nodded once. I won't, she said, not a promise, a commitment. When she left the medical wing, dawn was beginning to stain the horizon pale gold. She stood outside for a long moment, letting the cool air ground her. The weight hadn't lifted, but it had shifted. Purpose had a way of redistributing pain. Later that morning, she sat across from command. The room was larger than necessary, polished, intimidating by design. She learned to read its moods long ago. Today it leaned cautious. You took a risk, one general said. Yes, Angela replied evenly. You bypassed standard approval. I accelerated it. That's semantics. No, she said, it's accountability. A murmur followed. You exposed assets. I protected civilians. You set precedent. She met his gaze, so did hesitation. Silence. Another voice cut in, older, calmer. The op succeeded. Angela didn't react. Success was the smallest part of the story. After the meeting, she found herself standing again outside Marcus Jackson's office. This time, she didn't hesitate. He was packing gear when she entered, not rushed, methodical. You're leaving, she said. Short window, he replied, training rotation. She nodded. I wanted to say goodbye properly. He paused, then closed the bag. You okay? He asked. She considered lying. Instead, she said, I'm learning. He smiled slightly. That never stops. If it does, you should worry. She leaned against the doorframe. You know, people keep calling you a hero. He grimaced. I hate that word. I thought you might. It makes things simple, he said. This was. No, she agreed. It was. They stood in shared understanding. Two people shaped by lines crossed and lines held. You ever think about what happens when you don't step in? She asked. All the time, he said quietly. She nodded. That's what scares me. He met her eyes. Good, it should. That afternoon, Angela addressed a different room. Not command, not analysts. Junior enlisted, mixed ranks, faces that still believed the uniform meant clarity. She told them a story. Not about the bar, not about Red Basin. About a moment when someone waited too long. She didn't name names. She didn't assign blame. She asked questions instead. What does belonging look like? When does restraint become permission? Who are you when no one's watching? The room stayed silent long after she finished. In the days that followed, things changed subtly. Conversations paused when they should. Interventions happened sooner, not always perfectly, but earlier. She noticed. One evening, back at the same bar, different night, different energy, she stood near the counter again. This time not waiting, observing. Laughter rose, drinks poured, but something else moved through the room too. Awareness, memory. A young Marine brushed past a woman too roughly and immediately turned back. Apologized. Genuine. Angela watched without expression. Progress wasn't loud. It was cumulative. As she left, she caught her reflection in the glass. Same face, same tired eyes. But something had settled. She understood now that resilience wasn't about enduring quietly forever. Sometimes it was about deciding when quiet was no longer acceptable. And as she stepped into the night, Angela Martinez carried with her the knowledge that strength, once seen, had a way of teaching others how to stand. Even when no one was watching. Why did the quiet feel earned for the first time in years? Angela Martinez stood alone on the tarmac just before sunrise, hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket as cold air wrapped around her like a held breath. The horizon was still undecided, neither night nor day, that thin, fragile hour where everything felt possible and nothing was promised. She liked this hour. It didn't demand anything from her. Behind her, a transport aircraft idled, low and steady. Marcus Jackson would be on it. Another rotation. Another stretch of places that didn't show up on maps. He hadn't asked her to come. She hadn't announced herself either. They both understood that some goodbyes didn't need permission. Footsteps approached. "Ma'am," Marcus said quietly. She turned to Chief. They stood there for a moment, neither rushing to fill the space. Engines hummed. Wind tugged at loose fabric. Somewhere farther down the line, ground crew moved with practiced ease. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," she replied. "I wanted to." He nodded once, accepting it without ceremony. For a while, they watched the horizon together. "Do you ever think about stopping?" he asked. She didn't answer immediately. The question deserved respect. "Yes," she said finally. "Not because I'm tired of the work, because I'm tired of carrying it alone." He glanced at her. "That's not the same thing." "No," she agreed. "It's worse." Marcus shifted his weight. "You don't carry it alone." She almost laughed, almost. "Most days," she said, "it feels like leadership means absorbing everyone else's silence." He considered that. Maybe, or maybe it means teaching people when not to be silent. She looked at him then, really looked, at the lines earned by attention, at the calm that didn't need validation. "You changed something," she said. "So did you," he replied. The loudspeaker crackled. Boarding call. Marcus adjusted the strap of his bag. "Take care of yourself, ma'am," he said. She nodded. "You too, Chief." He hesitated, then added, "and Angela." She raised an eyebrow slightly. "Thank you," he said, "for not letting it end in that bar." She swallowed. "Thank you for not letting it start there either." He smiled once, then turned and walked toward the aircraft, disappearing into motion and purpose. Angela stayed until the plane lifted off, until sound faded and the sky reclaimed its quiet. Later that morning she stood before a mirror in her office, fastening her uniform jacket. Same motions she'd performed thousands of times, but something about today felt different, not lighter, clearer. Her phone buzzed. A message from the young sergeant who'd spoken to her days earlier. "Ma'am, stepped in last night. Wasn't easy, but it mattered." She stared at the screen longer than necessary. Then she replied, "It always does." The day unfolded without drama. Meetings, briefings, decisions that would ripple outward long after she'd moved on to the next one. But beneath it all, she noticed subtle shifts. People spoke sooner. Questions were asked out loud instead of swallowed. Silence was interrupted, not aggressively but deliberately. At lunch, she overheard a group of junior officers discussing leadership, not tactics, not promotions. Responsibility. She didn't interrupt, she let it exist. That afternoon, she visited the memorial wall on base. Names etched clean and permanent. She traced none of them. She simply stood there, letting the weight be what it was. She thought of the convoy, the bar, the woman in the medical wing, the Marine on the floor, Marcus stepping forward without asking who deserved protection. All of it connected by the same thin thread. Joyce. As the sun dipped low, she returned home and sat on the porch with a cup of coffee gone cold. Neighborhood sounds drifted around her. Laughter, a door closing, life continuing in small, ordinary ways. She let herself feel something she usually denied. Pride. Not in rank, not in authority, in endurance that hadn't hardened her into cruelty, in restraint that hadn't turned into permission, in strength that hadn't needed applause. Her phone buzzed one last time that night, a message from the recovered asset. "Walking tomorrow, thank you for seeing me." Angela closed her eyes. "You're welcome," she thought, but what she typed was simpler. "Always." Later, lying in bed, she stared at the ceiling as sleep finally approached without resistance. The bar replayed once more in her mind, but differently now, not as a wound, as a marker. A moment when silence had been broken, not by rank, not by noise, but by someone deciding that dignity mattered more than comfort, and by someone else choosing to stand without becoming what had threatened her. As darkness settled fully, Angela Martinez understood the truth she'd been circling her entire career. Strength isn't proven by how loudly you respond. It's revealed by when you refuse to look away. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.